Hello, everybody. This is Thursday, July 16th, 2 p.m., and we are going to talk about an interesting new organization, at least interesting to us, and you may or may not know who they are, but they're playing a little bit of both sides against the middle between Cuba and Iran. And we're going to say at first glance, the article should be, or the piece should be about Iran, but after looking a little deeper, it may actually be about Cuba. So recently, if you're a Floridian, you would have seen this probably. A former Florida governor, Jeb Bush, appeared publicly holding a model of an Iranian Shahed drone and warned that reports suggested hundreds of similar drones could be located in Cuba. Now, whether that number ultimately proves accurate isn't really the point of today's discussion. The question I want to ask is much simpler. Why is the chairman of United Against Nuclear Iran, which is Jeb Bush, suddenly talking about Cuba? So, first of all, who is United Against Nuclear Iran, which is the UANI? Most Americans have probably never heard of United Against Nuclear Iran for a number of reasons. It is a private nonprofit organization founded to increase pressure on the Iranian regime. They advocate sanctions, monitor Iranian shipbuilding, publish reports on sanctions evasion, and operate one of the better known tanker tracking programs following Iranian oil exports. You can find it online, look up UANI, and it'll come up probably the first choice there. But this isn't simply a research organization. It exists to influence policy. It is seeking to influence governments. It seeks to influence corporations and financial institutions, and of course, put pressure onto Iran. And they don't hide any of that. That's in their stated mission. So when Jeb Bush is talking about Iran, he's not simply expressing a personal opinion. He's speaking as chairman of an organization whose purpose is to shape American policy toward Tehran. And that's where this stuff really gets to be interesting, is because for years, UANI focused almost exclusively on Iran. Then suddenly, bang, Cuba enters the conversation. Not because of Cuban politics, because, Jeb's brother was president for a while, and so was his father, and they were both familiar with Cuba. It didn't seem to bother them too much. And it's not because of the tourism or the economics, because Cuba has a couple of things, but not to make it a cash cow. There's no gigantic oil or diamond mines or any of that kind of stuff. But because of these alleged Iranian drones, which could at any moment burst out and destroy Miami. Not that anybody would mind, but that immediately raises a question in my mind when I saw it, and a number of other people, is, did Cuba suddenly become an Iran problem? Or has Iran become the vehicle through which Cuba is now being discussed? Which is an important difference well, we'll explain. Politics often runs on images more than statistics. Iranian drones 90 miles from Florida. It would be an extraordinarily powerful headline, not given the situation that we have with the Trump administration right now. And then whether there are 50 drones, 300 drones, or none at all, the image itself challenges how people think. It's like sharks in the water off of Hollywood Beach. They're going to be there. What are you going to do? Right? Iran is no longer just a Middle Eastern issue. Now it's in the Caribbean, which is kind of funny. Here's an aside. I guess it's over a year or so ago. A member of the Quds Force, a high-ranking officer, was detained in Colombia. He was trying to hire Colombians, thugs, to murder some Israeli or Jewish businessmen in Colombia, and then hire additional Colombian hitmen to kill Jews in Miami and certain other places, all businessmen. Somehow he got loose. We never got a hold of the United States, never got a hold of him, but that was dangerous. Venezuela had a certain amount of land that Iran had purchased, straight up purchased, which would have been a good spot for missiles. That didn't seem to bother any people in the Bush administration or any of these other goofs. But now they're starting to worry about Cuba and these drones, okay? So that's the real odd, Iran's got stuff in Cuba. They had stuff in Venezuela. They had things going on in Colombia. They've been all over down here. Why is this going on now? And it is an effective strategic communication, of course, because they are down there stirring the hornet's nest in Miami with this stuff. That's where the meeting was held, where we had the piece of the drone or whatever you want to call it. You can watch the videos yourself. They're easy to find. So here's where I think you need to slow down, meaning the people in Dade County. If you listen carefully to Bush's presentation, he argues that President Trump has significantly degraded Iran's military capability. And if that's true, then why would a few hundred drones in Cuba suddenly become the defining strategic concern? Why would Cuba, communist Cuba, who's really on the tipping point with us, even think that that would be a good idea to allow to have happen, right? So those kind of things in my mind don't really go, but they have already written this dialogue, they have written this narrative, and they're moving forward with it. And that doesn't logically lead to an invasion of Iran, right? Oh, they have stuff in Cuba. Let's go invade Iran to teach them a lesson. That shows you the economics don't fit there. The energy markets don't fit. The global shipping, none of the things that we normally look at fit into that. Whatever they've done here deserves for us to launch a full-scale invasion of Iran. Now, if you want to go and say to yourself, well, perhaps Iran is the entry point, right? So now let's think about Cuba itself and forget the ideology for a moment and look at the geography. You're 90 miles off the coast of Florida, major sea lanes, the entrance to the Gulf of America or Mexico, depending where you live, proximity to U.S. Southern Command, access to communications, commercial shipping, Carnival Cruise Lines, we have it all. And then there's the other issue, which is your friends from China. Over the past several years, we've been seeing increasing discussions over suspected Chinese intelligence facilities in Cuba. We ran an article on it ourselves at South Florida Conservative that showed the satellite photographs of the Chinese listening facility that is in place and playing its electronic wonders into the United States. Ditto the one that the Soviet Union put in there years ago, and they just decided to bump up the volume on. So far more significant in the long term are these facilities rather than a handful of drones. Okay, so if Cuba were ever to experience major political change, those facilities are immediately going to become part of the discussion. And that is a strategic issue. So when everyone's telling you Cuba Libre, right? Most Americans hear the words free Cuba and immediately think, good, communism's going to be over, democracy's going to come in, the casinos are going to reopen, the Copa, all those places, Lucy, she'll have splaining to do, but that's only going to be the first chapter. What comes next is the important thing, who's going to govern this place? Write the Constitution, restructure the military, control the ports. Who's going to rebuild the electrical grid? Because it's not a matter of just putting gasoline into the engine there. They have scavenged that thing, right? Who's paying for the reconstruction? We haven't bombed any of it. So really, it's not up to us to do anything. The embargo, regardless of what anybody tells you, the rest of the world was pretty free to do what they wanted there. It just wasn't going to be the Americans or any of its immediate allies. And Russia put a lot of money into there years ago, which seems to have gone into Castro Isia's bank account somewhere else in the world. So that's going to be the big thing. Who's going to get these infrastructure contracts? Who determines sanctions relief? These are practical questions. It's not philosophical because from what I've seen, this is going to be the same issue that they have in Venezuela. The outlaws, the organizations outside of the countries that should be working on establishing a government in exile so that they can more accurately or authentically, pressure the United States into doing things, are not doing those things. Venezuela has yet to do anything except for that silly ass thing they did down in Panama. Excuse my language. They should be putting together who's going to run what, right? Because that shows that you are trying to put together a government for control. Same thing with Cuba. But that's not, we'd have to look into that even further than normal. And that's going to be something that we can discuss later on. So what we're looking, like I said, is all these things that have to be done into Cuba, all these things that are going to be big money. And then when the money shows up, even bigger money will be made by doing them. So that brings you back to the original question: why has UANI expanded its public conversation? And the answer could really be very simple. Maybe they're genuinely believe Iran has expanded its military footprint into Cuba. If so, that's important. But organizations rarely spend time, money, and political capital on issues that fall outside their traditional mission without believing those issues matter strategically. That's not an accusation. That's simply how these institutions behave. So the public should be asking some reasonable questions, which would be why now? Why Cuba? Why Jeb Bush? Who else is involved in that organization? What do they stand to gain? And why are they interested in theoretically Iranian connection to this particular island in the Caribbean when there have been other opportunities for them to get into something? Either of those questions you have out there, they all deserve answers. So the point of today's discussion isn't to criticize the UANI because they will sue us or they will blow up our cars. That's just a joke. They would never do that. Nor is it to dismiss the possibility that Iranian drones may actually be present in Cuba. The point is very simple. Whenever an organization broadens its mission, you better pay attention to it, especially one as well-funded and politically connected as the UANI. These are the people that are, if you looked at the list, it's going to read as a who's who of power prior to the Trump administration. Do not be fooled that these guys are in league with MAGA or even the Tea Party people. This is the good old days all over again. So a free Cuba would be a remarkable achievement. Millions of Cubans have lived under a lot of hardship, but the thing is, freeing them is only the beginning. The question is the important thing is what's going to follow. Are you getting rid of one master to take on another, or are you really trying to establish a democracy? And or whatever you want to have. And that's going to be the big question. So if you have any question about today's discussion, send it to any of the message spots on any of the sites that you're looking, like, subscribe, and share the program if you wish. I know that we are pretty much banned across every platform except for our own. So, that's how things are. But UANI, is that what I said it's called? If that's what it's called, take a look at them yourself and you'll see, when they used to tell you about the onion, you'll see that kind of a thing going on there. I'm just saying, I could be wrong. We'll put our disclaimer in there on the written parts. This is all for novelty and all that type of stuff. So there you have it. Have a good day. July 16th, 2/10. Bye-bye.